Hi everyone, I'm Sharon and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be creating a standard A2 size card featuring a bunny and her bear friend sitting tight together under a big pink umbrella while seeking refuge from a rain shower. The sun emerges just in time to shine its bright rays on the pair. Let's get started with a quick overview of the Lawn Fawn products that I will be using to create this card. A full list of supplies can be found in the description box below. The main images for this card come from Butterfly Kisses. I chose the bunny and bear because I want two sitting critters for my card's design. I use a few different die sets. First, the stitched umbrella, the outside in stitched sun, the straight flower border, the rainy backdrop in landscape, the largest of the large stitched rectangle stackables, Grassy Hillside borders, and the stitched Hillside borders. For the sentiment, I use You Are My from Smooth Sailing and the Scripty Sunshine from All the Clouds. The Everyday Sentiment banners, some 100-pound black licorice cardstock. I also use some 100-pound cilantro cardstock to build my scene. To start off, I use Lawn Fawn jet black ink to ink up my images that are arranged in my MISTI stamping tool. I ink up and stamp my images 3 times to get a crisp dark impression. You can see here that I stamped a sitting deer critter, but I decided against including him in the final card design. Off screen, I colored my images using my Ohuhu alcohol brush markers, used some washi tape to hold my dies in place, and run everything through my die cutting machine. Using a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock, which is an excellent cardstock for smooth ink blending, I die cut the rainy backdrop. There is both a landscape and a portrait version of this backdrop. I use my Sizzix die brush tool to remove the smaller raindrops that are still stuck to the panel. This is just a hard rolling brush that pushes the little pieces of the die cuts out. I want to have this stitched detail around my rainy backdrop, so I run my panel through my die cutting machine using the largest of the large stitched rectangle stackables. Here you can see the stitching detail around the panel. I want to create a rainy backdrop, but I don't want the sky's blue to be too desaturated or darkened with a gray undertone. Instead, I want a brighter, more saturated blue, so I decide to use MERMAID Lagoon. Afterwards, I use a small blending brush and some faded jeans just to darken the edges of the panel for some added contrast. I glue a strip of yellow cardstock diagonally onto another 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel to really make the sun's rays stand out behind the blue backdrop. I want to tie the image of the sun in more closely with the sentiment, You Are My Sunshine. The bottom white panel is a sliver too long, so I cut it off using my paper trimmer. Next, I use the largest of the large stitched rectangle stackables once again and die cut half a piece of cilantro cardstock because I want my ground to have the same stitch detail as my rainy backdrop panel. I use a stitched hillside border and then the matching grassy hillside border to cut some grass that is slightly higher than my ground. I'm doing this for an added layer of interest and dimension. I want my critters to be sitting on a smooth foreground with some grass and flowers coming in from behind them in the background. I use Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide to darken the edges and blend it out with some twisted citron. Then, for some added interest, I use some Mowed Lawn Distress ink, smush it onto my work surface, spray some water, and make some small splatters by tapping my paintbrush. Next, I move on to ink blending the other die cut pieces. I begin with the sun. I want a warm orange for the center, So I ink blend some spiced marmalade distress oxide. I use fossilized amber distress oxide for the sun's rays to create some contrast. I want to tie in the orange of the sun to the umbrella, so I ink blend some spiced marmalade, and for a pop of color, I use picked raspberry for the umbrella's outer canopy. Finally, I go with vintage photo for the shaft of the umbrella. I begin to assemble my umbrella with some liquid glue. This die set even includes a handle piece and a ferrule, which is the piece that goes at the very top tip of the umbrella, which I ink blended and picked raspberry as well to match the canopy. I decide to heat emboss my sentiment on some black licorice cardstock. I prepare the cardstock using an anti-static powder. I use Versamark watermark ink, specific for heat embossing. Then I take some Ranger super fine white embossing powder and I sprinkle it onto the sentiment strips, making sure to tap off the excess, and I pour the extra powder back into the jar. I use my heat tool to melt the powder to reveal a bright white sentiment that says, "You are my sunshine." Now for my favorite part, assembling the card. The first two things I adhere are the Grassy Hillside border and the stitched Hillside border. I use liquid glue and adhere the umbrella on an angle, slightly tilted to the left. I position the sun so that the three large rays are pointing on a diagonal and are in line with the diagonal yellow raindrops. I use some foam tape to pop up the bunny critter and its friend, the bear, up in front of the umbrella. And I really like how both of these critters are sitting, and it looks as if they are looking up at the rain. Next, I adhere the two sentiment strips. I want the first half of the sentiment to come from the left because our eyes generally travel from left to right when we are reading. And I also want the word sunshine to fall just under the sun die cut on the right. Off screen, I die cut the straight flower border and colored the flowers using my alcohol markers. I use similar colors to that of my umbrella and sun. I glue the flowers fairly evenly apart, but in hindsight, what I should have done is adhere the flowers first before putting on the umbrella and the critters. However, I do still manage to fit the flowers pretty seamlessly behind the bunny and the bear. For the finishing touch, I add some Ranger Stickles glitter glue. I turn the card over and cut off the excess paper. Next, to create the card base for my side folding A2 size card panel, I have a 5.5 by 8.5 inch piece of accent opaque 120-pound cardstock that I score at the midway 4.25 mark on the 8.5 inch side. This cardstock is heavy in weight and gives the recipient the tactile experience of holding a very durable card. I use some liquid glue to adhere the card front to the card base, and here we have it, my finished card. I have a bunny and its bear friends sitting tight under a big pink umbrella. Together, they are seeking refuge from a rain shower. The sun emerges just in time to shine its bright yellow rays on the pair. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I do hope that you will join me again next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.